So we are out at a 1971 Pontiac Trans Am. Right now I'm just getting my gloves on. I already talked through the whole job with the customer. The customer is a body restoration guy, and he already has a customer for this particular vehicle. He purchased the vehicle, and the customer is going to buy it from him, and he will get that shipped over. I'm setting up my WRD Bison for the cutout. I usually set these up vertical. I got the mirror out of the way a couple moments ago, and now I'm just going to stick my line feeder down through that lower driver's side corner of the urethane. This was already updated from butyl to urethane prior with the previous owner, and whoever did the body work on this last put a self-tapping screw up in up in the roof line where one of the chrome trim pins should be. So when my customer was taking that out, it did back out a little bit too far, put some pressure against the top edge of the glass there, and it did end up breaking the glass from the edge. When I put the poker through and I pulled it back out, it actually pulled the line back through with it, so now I have to refeed that line. This is a voiceover. This was actually the first video that I took, and I had my camera on a stand. I had my wireless transmitter plugged directly into my camera, and after the fact I realized that the wireless transmitter will not work with my camera, so every subsequent video has the transmitter into my phone, and then you get the wide angle shot with my phone on the tripod, and then a POV perspective as well. Now, for the second half of this video, it was actually taken after I did that Kenworth 680, and my phone had died, so there's no audio for this entire video. It will be voiced over. Right now I'm just being very careful with the line, being meticulous not to let it get tangled up in any of those trim clips or on any of those little studs that hold the clips onto the body. And I'm just taking my time. I'm in no hurry for this particular job. Just running it along the top, making sure to tuck it under the glass. Whoever installed this glass previously decked it down a little bit too far. There was a lot of glue ooze out inside and outside of the vehicle, and then they actually shot the urethane bead directly across the top from the corner, or directly across the bottom from the corners, and it went up onto the dash as well. So if you look close up at the lower edge of the glass, you won't be able to see it in the video, unfortunately, but you did see that glue line along the dashboard up underneath. So after I pull this, I'm giving the customer a day to grind off the entire top of the dash there along with the lower pinch weld, and he's going to clean that up really well, prime it before I come out the following day and reinstall the glass, which will be the second part of this video, will be the reinstallation. I just pulled the slack in from my fiber line on the Bison. Now I'm going to go through and hook my drill up and begin cutting it out. I do use my headliner guard once I start working my way up the pillar and onto the headliner. The headliner on these has a secondary part that lips up around the outside edge toward the glass, and I really want to make sure my line does not dig into that. There was a lot of ooze out over top of that piece as well, so after I get the glass out, you'll see the customer actually pull that piece off of the headliner, and he's going to re-straighten that out and install it a few days after I get done with the reinstallation of the glass. Because this was decked down so tight and there was a considerable amount of glue, I just bumped my my line through there, just feather the drill. Really make sure I can get through that without putting too much strain on it. Sticking the bison up to the center of the glass just to hold it in position so I can get to the other side. My line did get stuck between the cup and the glass, so you saw me pull that away and kind of reposition that so I could get it stuck onto there. Now I'm going to move it over to the top passenger corner, again keeping it vertical. Just the way that I like to use the bison, and by extension the orange bat as well, for smaller jobs. Sometimes I'll angle it, very rarely. Most of the time I just keep it vertical in the two top corners, and it works out very nicely. Move the mirror down out of my way to make sure I can get my headliner guard up underneath of that. And I'm just working my line across the top, being very careful to make sure my line doesn't dig into any part of that headliner or that secondary accent piece. The top's now met up with the bison, so I'll start working across the bottom. And that glue's so high, I actually am using the guard down there as well, just to keep the line up at a different angle, nice and tight to the glass, so I don't have to go through quite as much glue that's globbed up down there. Work my way up the passenger side pillar. I'm watching from the outside. There's quite a bit of a gap between the pillar and the glass, so I'm not worried about it going into that. Plus he has the pillar trim removed, so I'm just watching from the outside to make sure the line stays out of those clips. There's enough glue globbed up between the glass and the clips to where it was a risk of that occurring. But everything's about to be cut out here. I'll pop the bison down here momentarily, put everything back in the box, take it over, set it off to the side before actually lifting the glass out of the vehicle. With these particular vehicles, the doors themselves lip up over the bottom corners of the glass. So working with the doors open does open that up and make it so you don't run the risk of hitting into a door. But he does shut the door, or I shut the door to allow him to get through with some stuff. He's cleaning off a body panel stamp now, just so I can set the glass on there. He requested that he takes the mirror off. He wants to check it over for damage. It was very cloudy and pitted, so he does have a brand new mirror that he put on after I finished the installation the following day. So we're just going through, inspecting the mirror. He's grabbing a little Allen and popping that off. I'm just checking over the pinch weld, making sure there's nothing else that he has to do later that day. He's kind of pointing out places where it peeled, places where the glue oozed out, and went on to that other accent piece that lips up over the headliner. And you'll see him pull that off here shortly as soon as he gets the mirror off the glass. And I'm just checking to see the extent of that ooze out across the top. It didn't stick to that headliner piece at all, but it is filling that void. So as he peels that off, I actually go through and tear off that excess glue that's between the pinch weld and the headliner. At this point, I'm pointing out where some of the glue actually peeled off from the body. There just wasn't good adhesion in some spots. He's pointing out the little peg that was missing that they had put a self-tapping screw into that he has to fix up later. And then now he's pulling off that trim piece that goes around the headliner. I'm reaching back, pulling off some of the excess glue that was stuck in between there, just to get that cleaned up for him. And I did tell him to go ahead and leave as much of that glue on there as possible and to not trim it, just to prevent possible contamination. But as you'll see in the second portion of this video, he did end up trimming that glue back just to gain access to the outside edges of that. Now we're to the next day. You'll see I have all my preparation supplies out ready to go, sitting on top of the glass. I'm kind of using the new glass as a table, using my microfiber as a cushion. I do wash the microfibers after every use, so they are clean. So at this point I'm pointing out where I need to make a frit band around this glass. There's a frit across the bottom, the ceramic spray from the factory, but the pillars and the roof line are all fritless on this particular glass, so I will have to create one with primer. Just putting 2 coats of primer down, letting that flash off each time, making sure there's a good layer. Super particular, nice and even all the way around, which we'll get to here in a bit. I'm taking out my WRD scraper, putting a wing blade on it, because I definitely do not want to risk scratching up underneath of where those clips were and where the pegs are. He already went through and refinished all of this. As I said before, he did go ahead and trim the glue down, and then he completely ground down the entire front of the dash and the upper cowl area / lower pinch weld. In order to refinish that dash, there were a couple little scrapes and gouges and stuff from, I'm assuming, the previous install. There's not really any other way that that particular area could have gotten scratched up and marred, but he did a great job restoring that dash to where it should be. So I'm just going through, and any places that he missed as far as trimming, there was a couple little high spots. I'm going through and nipping those in the bud right now, just to make sure we have good fresh cut glue and it's nice and clean, smoothed out, no flappies for water to get up underneath once I get that new urethane bead shot. Here my camera does get very close to that pillar. It's not actually bumping it, it's just the way that the camera is angled and zoomed a little bit. It's sitting about 4 inches away from that pillar, just in case anybody's worried about the paint job. But it's, no harm was done to the vehicle. I was very particular about making sure this job was as perfect as humanly possible, because this is a very high-end restoration, and this particular customer expects perfection. Not him, but his customer, who I'm not going to say who it is, just for the privacy of that individual. And you can kind of see right there where the old glass stopped. Both of those stops at the bottom are still intact and good. They both still have the rubber coating over the edge of that little L-shaped piece of steel. And I told him he was going to remove those. I told him not to remove those, that I'll actually be utilizing those when I go to set the glass. We're actually going to 2-man set this, just because the pinch weld is so small and there's not much real estate as far as the glue, and I want to make sure this thing is perfectly centered, perfectly decked, exactly where it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and take some glass cleaner, take my clean microfiber, and just give it a little spritz, clean it up real good. He did already cut it. Normally I would not spray over cut glue, but because he did it, I don't know what other contaminants could have gotten on that old urethane over the course of the past, probably 18 hours since I was here the last time, and I just want to be doubly sure that there's no contamination on that trimmed urethane. So I'm just giving it a good once over, a good scrub, wipe off that dash in the lower pinch weld area where he refinished, to make sure there was no residual dust. And again, you can see I'm folding the microfiber to make sure I have a clean spot going into the next side for that cleanup and that decontamination of the pinch weld here. I don't want to take dirt from one side, bring it over to the next. I'll always habitually fold towels and paper towels and microfibers in order to ensure that I'm getting the cleanest area possible with minimal contamination. I'm just going through and scrubbing up under all of those little pegs. He already removed the clips at this point. And then after I get done prepping the body and priming it, at that point I have him reinstall those trim clips. That way we know exactly where to set it, so they're not going to interfere with the actual chrome trim that goes around the glass. Getting up into that corner, making sure everything's nice and clean, spick and span. And then I'm just folding the microfiber over again, just for the next time that I go to use it, if I need it again this job, which I do not. So I go ahead and pack it back into the box, grab some activator. The previous video, that Kenworth T680, I actually had someone comment on that about how he was always taught to not use a paper towel to apply activator. It's actually a perfectly acceptable way to apply activator. It's in the Sika book and the procedure manual. In order to get certified on the Sika urethane system, you can use a clean paper towel and go continuously in one direction. If you have to change directions or lift up the paper towel for any reason, then you fold over to a new spot. But I have the little activator pads for this job. Normally I use those on cars, and the only time I really use the paper towel is if I do have a semi or an excavator or something that has a large pinch weld that I don't feel like using 4 different activator pads on it. I am lifting it up and moving and doing different directions with that activator pad, just for the convenience of it, making sure I'm hitting exactly where I want to hit. But I decontaminated the pinch weld prior to that, so I'm not too worried about contamination from the activator pad. I'm just kind of looking back, doing a once over, making sure that everything looks good, figuring out exactly where I want to prime, and I should be grabbing the primer here. Yep, grabbing the can of primer, shaking it up. Sorry for the camera shake, but got to shake the primer up, make sure it's nice and mixed. Taking the cap off, laying everything on the glass, or I laid it on the WRD scraper box to make sure I don't drip a bunch of primer onto the glass. Stirring it up a little bit with the dauber, dipping it, making sure there's not a bunch of excess. And I'm just doing a thin primer line over the whole bottom line, not the entire bottom line, but anywhere there's not glue. And when you do prime the body, if you're using a primer adhesive system, you do want to make sure that if you're priming over a exposed area, you also overlap that glue by, a 1/4 to 1/2 an inch, just to make sure there's no gaps there, so it doesn't negatively affect your bond when you do shoot that new urethane down. He did prime the lower pinch weld and the dash, as you can see, but I am going to put the Sika primer over top of where the actual urethane line is going to go, just because I'm not sure the exact type of primer he used, and I want to ensure a good bond across the bottom. So I will shape that according to how I'm going to be shooting the bead on the glass. I've done a few of these 71 Trans Ams in the past, and I know roughly the shape of the bottom of the glass and how my bead is going to set. So it's just something that comes with experience in doing some of these classics. Originally this was done with butyl, and then prior to me coming out and doing it this day, it was already updated to urethane, and now I'm redoing it in urethane. So it saves me the hassle of picking off the butyl, but because they did a poor job across the bottom, it's pretty much back to square one and redoing a bond line. I do apologize again for the camera angle. I'm using the chest mount. The next video will have my new head strap for the GoPro, so it'll be a better point of view angle. I'm just kind of dialing in what works for me. So the first 2 videos is just getting the lay of the land as far as making these YouTube videos and trying to do right as far as camera angles and audio and ensuring decent quality for these videos, because I will use these for advertising on other social media as well. So I'm moving to the passenger side, shutting the door a little bit just so I have better access from the outside area in order to prime the rest of the roof, down that passenger side pillar, and then again creating the bond line out of the primer on the lower pinch. You see a couple little nicks and scrapes in the paint there. That was not me. That was him when he was popping the clips off. But it's only down through the paint. It's not down through the electrocoat that he did. when he redid the entire body of this vehicle. Another thing I'll touch on, it's back to the decontamination process. I did clean that pinch weld well, so I'm not worried about redipping my dauber into the primer can. Some guys only like dipping it once and then they'll use a whole new dauber the next time, but if you properly decontaminate the pinch weld, that should not be a problem. You shouldn't be putting contaminants into that primer can as long as you did your job properly during the pinch weld prep stage as far as decontamination. And the same thing goes with me. There's a couple spots here coming up that I'll run the dauber back and forth almost like a paintbrush. And again, I decontaminated the pinch weld properly, so I don't have any fear of rubbing contaminants from one area to another on that pinch. Another horrible camera angle. But I got the primer line across the bottom. Now I'm just going through, getting this lower passenger corner nice and primed up, meeting the lower end of the old urethane line as well. And then there's that little dip down in there that I had to get primer down into to ensure a complete bond line. I also noticed I goofed on that corner. There's a little swoop on that lower corner, and I didn't match the driver's side exactly how I wanted to. I got a little overzealous, so I went over and touched that up a little bit, and now we're good to go. Just comparing it again, doing it once over. Putting a second layer on some spots that were just exposed before I put primer on. Because he had primer on the lower pinch and the dash there, I only put one coat down there. And I do let this flash off fully in between coats and everything. The video, it'll clip and cut, but that's just post-production. I was here for considerably longer than what the video shows me at location 4. And him and I were just talking during the flash-off periods. Putting everything away, making sure my work area is cleaned up, making sure I'm not tripling and stumbling over my equipment. Figuring out where I want to set my cups. I'm going to end up putting them upside down into the upper cowling in that vent area. It's not going to harm the body at all. It keeps the surface of my cups out of any potential dirt. And now I'm going through and checking this antenna cord and the lead. I talked to my delivery driver for the glass. I made sure he babied that wire because that lead is very, very delicate. They tend to break off extremely easily, even more so than a heater tab or a heater wire for a heated wiper park. I checked that, made sure it was good. Now I'm just using that same tape, taping it to the outside edge of the glass. Now I'm going to start pulling the tape off and then giving the inside of that glass a really, really thorough scrub. This particular glass had a considerable amount of oil coating from the factory. So you'll see me actually take that melamine sponge and wipe the entire glass down and scrub the entirety of the glass to ensure there's no residual oil marks. And he's just going around looking at the work I did, how I set the primer line. He is very, very satisfied with this job as a whole, which was a good compliment to me as well. But I'm just removing tape. I'm in no rush on this particular job, so I'm taking my time. It might seem like I'm removing tape at a snail's pace, but everything I'm just doing very methodically. Figure the glass is small enough, I only need half of a melamine sponge. Go ahead and hose down the outside edge of that glass. And I will start at the bottom frit. Give that a really good scrub. And you can actually see a lot of the cloudiness caused from that oil spray that's over the glass right now. The vast majority of that's going to be gone by the time I'm all done. There's still some residual left on there, not on the bond line, but towards the middle, just because it's very difficult to get it off the clear parts of the glass. If I was having more issues with the frit, I would have taken a Scotch pad, went through and really did a deep clean of it, but the melamine worked really well on the frit and the outside edge. And this part of the job is extremely important. If you don't decontaminate that bond line, even if you prime over it, that primer can break free over time where it's contaminated, and it'll cause bond failure. And that's the last thing you want. So just scrubbing it. If I see residual oil, I'll focus on one spot. If there's not that much oil, then I'll give it a scrub still, but I won't really stop at that point. I'm being extra careful to make sure that the fritless edge is super scrubbed down. That way my primer can stick to that when I'm creating the frit. Now I'm just going through scrubbing the rest of the glass with that melamine, getting a lot of that oil coating off of there. Grab some paper towels, wipe off the outside rim of that glass. Just get a lot of that contamination off of there, along with a lot of the oil that I scrubbed up. Once I go on the outside, I'll go ahead and spray it down again. Fold the paper towel again so the contamination doesn't go back on the glass that I just scrubbed. Find a nice dry, clean spot on that, and then go ahead and give the glass one more good wipe down. You can see some of that residual oil, but right on the bond line, it's actually cleared off very nicely. A lot of it's the glare from the lights getting reflected in the glass and off of the frit. Just making sure there's not any spots left over, making sure it's nice and dry, no streaks. I'll go ahead and grab a melamine sponge, and what I'm doing is actually priming the outside edge of that melamine so it's a thinner primer line. Because there's not much pinch weld real estate, you don't want that primer line or the pseudo frit really showing through around the chrome. You want to keep it as tucked up under that chrome as humanly possible, just for aesthetic reasons. So I'm using the smallest part of the melamine that I can, and I'll go through very meticulously, very slow, and make that frit out of the primer. And I do put 2 coats down. I apply this coat, I let it flash off, I grab another sponge, apply a second coat, let that flash, and then I proceed to shoot the bead on the glass itself just to make sure I'm getting a good width and height on that new bead, making sure it's riding the outside edge of that glass about 1/8 of an inch in. And I do not deck these that hard. I just barely touch them down when it's all said and done. Makes really good adhesion, but you don't want a big gap between that chrome trim and the glass. You want a little bit of a gap, but not too much. And if this is going to be driven, which I doubt, knowing the customer who's actually purchasing this vehicle, most likely it's going to get driven maybe a couple miles a year, if that. Most likely it'll actually sit in a collection. So now I'm going through making that frit, making a primer line all the way around. You can see just how thin that primer line is. So now both coats of primer are on there. They had time to flash off. I'm just kind of packing everything up. And I'll take that back. I'm going through and reapplying a second coat of primer now. Now I'm just following my initial primer line, and I'm making sure it's directly on top of it. I don't want any lighter colored, like a duplicate line, under there. So I'm using my fingers as a guide along the edge of the glass, running that primer right along the outside edge over top of the original line that I made, just so it doubles up and doesn't have any opaque, shadowy areas. I want it nice and blacked out, like a true frit would be if it had it on there. So that's all done. I do let this flash off, and I'm going to start shooting the glue here momentarily for you guys. There was probably a good 9 minutes in between right now and the next scene. So I'm shooting the glue directly onto the glass. Primer is nice and flashed over. It's nice and solid. Just holding my gun vertical, barely touching that trigger. It's almost like a Volkswagen New Beetle bead, where it almost seems unreasonably thin, but it is the correct amount of glue for these, and the New Beetles for that matter. You just want a really thin bead, that way it doesn't ooze out and get everywhere. And I'm just going right around the outside edge of the glass here. While that primer was flashing off, I went ahead and put my cups on there. Got it all ready to go. So once I'm done shooting this and I get it seamed, at that point I'll take the driver's side. My customer will take the passenger side, and we will set her into place. The glass itself does curl around the passenger pillars a little bit, just the shape of it. So when it's on the stand like this, it is a considerable amount of elevation. So it is kind of wonky trying to lift the gun up as you're going around there and trying to keep a nice straight bead. It's hard to tell exactly how thin that bead is from the video, but it is within regulation, but it is very, very thin. Just enough to make a good secure bond, nice and watertight, but I do not want this oozing anywhere. Very slowly and methodically going around the outside edge, making sure it's as perfect as humanly possible. I stair step this bead into itself to make the seam, run it along the top. And I do take and butter those seams together with a popsicle stick. Now we're just going to swing it up over top here. It's nice that those fenders are not in there because you can really get your leg up in there and get a good vantage point to set. And I'm having him just hold it up off of the vehicle for me until I get my side set, and then he can work his way across. And if you notice, right where I'm setting the glass on top of that stop, I actually put a little strip of thin rubber on both sides. But that's just to cushion the glass and lift it up just a skosh. But that was a 71 Trans Am, and I will see you guys in the next video.